Well, hello and welcome to episode 197 of Speaking with Confidence with Kat Matson, the show where I help you, where I coach you, in fact, humble leaders, business owners, public servants, how to speak, how to communicate with authority, with confidence, and with impact, so you can make the desired change that you want to make in your world. And yes, this is episode 197, which means I'm only 3 episodes away from episode 200. And yes, I am celebrating, and I really need your help for this. In the show notes, I will post a link to my Instagram account, and you'll find there an Instagram post where you can ask questions, or you can kind of leave a toast, if you like, for the podcast. What do you love about listening to this podcast? What have you taken away from this podcast? Why do you keep coming back? Basically, anything that you would say if we were at a party and you were proposing a toast to the podcast. Of course, you can also ask me a question or leave the toast just below in comments if you're listening on Spotify. And why am I doing this? Well, because 200 episodes is a pretty big deal. And one of the very interesting things for me about podcasting is it's a very one-way medium. It's me talking to you, and I'm in your ears, but I don't often get to hear what the podcast means for you. And I'm also terrible at celebrating my achievements. So 200 episodes is a worthy milestone. So I would love it, love it, love it if you could help me celebrate such a milestone. So yeah, as I said, Instagram post or comments in Spotify. I'll leave the notes below on how you can help me celebrate that milestone. Just ask me a question that I can answer in episode 200, or toast. Just share a toast as an acknowledgement. But for now, episode 197, let's get into the guts of it. And today I'm talking about trusting yourself to say the right thing. Now, this is a big one, right? Because people are scared to even speak up in case they say the wrong thing or in case they don't say the right thing. And this was brought home to me when I recently asked the question in a Facebook group that I'm a member of, Tash Corbin's Heart-Centered Soul-Driven Entrepreneurs. I asked, what would you like me to answer in an upcoming podcast episode? And 2 people gave me very similar responses. And so there's a podcast, right? So Katie said, well, how about confidence in knowing what to say, trusting yourself in providing the right content? And then Sharon said, well, what about intuitional confidence, developing the confidence to trust your intuition and learning to listen to the small voice? Oh, now, I spoke a little bit about developing your confidence and understanding where your authority comes from in last week's episode. So if you haven't listened to that, make sure when you finish this one, you jump back and have a listen to that. But this whole notion of trusting yourself to say the right thing is a really big conversation, particularly for us women. As a recovering overthinker and self-doubter, I have often well and truly overthought what I was going to say. I have doubted that what I have to say is of value, and I've second-guessed myself over and over and over again. And what I want to share is a few things that I do from a preparing and a thought process that helps me find the right content. The other thing that I want to do is then talk about that intuition piece and how I have strengthened my intuition to trust that what I'm saying is correct, even if I don't necessarily have external evidence. So the first thing is asking myself, when I was in the position that my listener is now in, what did I want to know? Now, I know that sounds a little odd, and it's coming from a place of recognizing that if you're teaching people something, if you're explaining something, if you are preparing content, you are passing on your wisdom and your knowledge. And if you're passing on your wisdom and your knowledge, then there is an assumption that previously you didn't have that wisdom or that knowledge. And what you're then checking in with is, well, what did I want to know when I was in my listener's shoes? Now, if you are sharing something that you've always known, and it's not so much when you were there, it's more, well, what would be useful to them? What is relevant? Stepping into the shoes of your listeners is really important, and asking, well, what's relevant, what's useful, what's helpful for them? I particularly honed this skill when I was moderating panels. In fact, I did this every month for a networking event called Networks. And for every month for 5 years, I moderated the panel discussion, and we covered all sorts of different topics around marketing. And every time I would prepare, I would ask myself, what do I want to know about this topic? So I would go in with genuine curiosity. And when you approach your topic from a place of curiosity, then you will find the things that your listeners want to know. The other way that you can know that you are delivering the right content is by being in ongoing relationship or conversation with your audience. So I just said earlier that, podcasting is an interesting one-way conversation, but I will pay attention to what people like on my social media. I will pay attention to the questions that I'm being asked in my coaching programs. I will pay attention to the answer to the question, what is your biggest challenge when it comes to speaking? And those answers give me insights into what people want to know. And so therefore, when I respond to that, when I craft content that answers those questions, I can trust that it is the right content. Trusting too then that if one person has asked the question, then lots of other people have the same question is also key, which is why, for example, I'm answering audience or listener questions, and why I ask in Facebook groups, what would you like me to discuss? Because I know that if somebody is asking me this question, then other people want the answers as well. The other way that you can collect evidence of what people want to hear from you is just paying attention to the conversations that you're having on a daily basis with your clients or with your existing groups. And depending on the form of content that you're creating, if you're creating social media content or a newsletter or a podcast episode, you might need to take it back a few steps so you're back in the beginner's mind, and recognizing though that the conversations that you're having with your clients is a reflection of the information that is valuable to your wider audience. So that's how you get the evidence of what people are looking for. How do you then learn to trust your intuition? Well, the first thing I am going to say here is that it is actually getting harder and harder and harder to trust our intuition when we are being bombarded by AI-generated content and formulas and structures for presenting back our information. It's almost like we are being dulled down to look the same. And so if you're scrolling social media too much, if you're reading too many newsletters that aren't authentic voice, then the risk you take is that you will smooth out your edges and you will lose your authentic voice, because you will be, I'm going to use the word brainwashed into thinking that you need to give certain kinds of information in certain ways. So with that said, I think it's important in the first instance to listen to that small voice, to listen to our intuition, to actually be conscious about how we interact with the online world, and to disconnect and connect with our own voice more often. Now, whether that's journaling, whether that's conversations with like-minded people, whether that's a walk, whether it's meditation, whatever that is for you, being really present to how you develop your own ideas and articulating your own ideas in your authentic voice is really important. Anything that you can do to increase your intuitive capability is also really important. And I had a spectacular conversation with Sinead Carey, it's a couple of years ago now, on this podcast. I will post a link to the episode in the show notes. Now, Sinead, for those who don't know, is an intuitive business mentor, and she dives deep in this episode on how you can build and strengthen your intuition. So the question that came through the group this week was, well, how can you trust that intuition? For me, trusting my intuition when it comes to saying what needs to be said has actually been as simple as doing it. Even when that rational mind is saying, are you sure that's useful? Are you sure people really want to hear it? One of the pieces of evidence that I have for this is whenever I have done a podcast episode or a piece of content that I actually feel was lackluster, that I actually feel was, oh God, I could have done that again, I will ask myself, but is it okay to publish? And the intuitive response 9 times out of 10 has been, yes, somebody needs to hear that. And so even though the logical, rational mind is kind of saying to me, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, my intuition is saying, yes, publish. And when I've done that, they are the pieces of content that get the most reactions, the most responses, and they're positive. I will get comments from people saying, oh my goodness, thank you so much. I needed to hear that today. Oh my goodness, I really enjoyed that episode. That was one of the best ones yet. Now, that trust now comes from that experience. So how do you develop that trust of your intuition? You practice even when it doesn't feel fabulous, even when you're doubting it, because it's doing it in the even when it feels odd, and then you get the feedback that you go, oh, okay, that worked. That worked. I think the other thing to remember, and this goes a little bit back to what I was saying before about AI, what people are wanting more and more in today's AI homogenous, everything's the same world is authenticity. And so when you trust your intuition to bring your expertise, your experience, your insight, your opinion, and when you express that, sure, you might annoy some people, but you will connect deeply with your people. And so trusting that your authenticity will connect with the people who you want the most. Yes, that's a bit of practice. And I also think that it is the biggest gift that you can offer your audience these days, because it's your humanity that people want to connect with, not a formula and not a piece of information that they can Wikipedia or Google. So as I said, I'm going to post a link to an interview that I've done on this podcast before with Sinead Carey about building your intuition and the practices that she recommends to deepen your intuition. That was episode 123. And I would love to know, how do you trust your intuition? How do you listen for your intuition? I think that's what I really want to ask. So if you're listening on Spotify, just comment below, or if it's a bit hard for you to comment on whatever platform then you're listening, then just come and find me over on Instagram at Kat Matson. I will post the link in the show notes, and let me know how you develop your intuition. A reminder that I am celebrating my 200th episode in just a few weeks, and I would love your help to celebrate. So please ask me a question and/or toast the episode. Let me know what you enjoy about the Speaking with Confidence with Kat Matson podcast so I can celebrate in that particular episode. The details on how to do that are in the show notes. And the final thing that I want to say is, if you're not already on my Substack newsletter, please come and join me. Why? Because I dive deeper into the topics of every podcast every week. I share more insight into how I practice whatever I've just talked about, as well as doing a bit of a working out loud piece. Like, I'll let you know what's going on in my world, which is always about how do I create the biggest impact I can possibly make. It's in my Substack newsletter that I also let you know of upcoming events, like my recent Speaking with Impact 7-day practice series. So it's a legitimately valuable newsletter that is worth having in your inbox. The details for that are also in the show notes. So with that, I really hope that I've answered those questions. How about building the confidence in knowing what you say, trusting that you're providing the right content, as well as developing, your intuition, and trusting that what your intuition is telling you to say is what needs to be said. Until I see you next week, Here's to confidence and here's to impact. I'll catch you soon.